All right, I'm going to be honest. I was not planning on recording this video originally. It is very late. It is 10:10 at night. I got class tomorrow, but I would have felt bad if I wasn't able to get out a video for you all. I was trying to come up with some ideas, see if there's any league-wide news, NFL related stuff, and there was really nothing. But this little rumor and buzz from the Senior Bowl popped up on my feed. And this rumor is in regards to the Saints declining a trade back at the trade deadline back around October, November. So that's what we're talking about today. And if you enjoy these videos, enjoy the grind, make sure you're subscribed. We're trying to hit 10K in 2025. We're getting really close to 8,000 subscribers. 72% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed. So you're already here. Take a few seconds, double check. It's free. It helps the channel out a lot, and it would mean a lot to me. All right, with that being said, let's talk about this rumor about the Saints possibly declining a trade back by the trade deadline. So I was on Twitter earlier today, and all over my feed, there was a whole bunch of people retweeting and quote tweeting and talking about the Saints declining a trade for one of their defensive players back at the trade deadline. And as we all know, the Saints were very busy around the trade deadline. They had just fired Dennis Allen after having a 7-game losing streak. They're dealing with all the paperwork and that busyness. Then, of course, the busyness of promoting Darren Rizzi, going through the changes of the locker room, the personnel changes that Darren Rizzi was making. It was a busy time for the Saints, but that wasn't even the biggest news to come out around that time. Because as we all know, the Saints traded Marshon Lattimore to the Washington Commanders literally a day or two after Dennis Allen was fired. It was a very busy time of the season for the Saints. And why don't we revisit this Marshon Lattimore trade? So the Saints sent the Washington Commanders a 5th-round pick and Marshon Lattimore, the best cornerback in Saints franchise history. And then they also took on his contract from the looks of it. The Saints received a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick in return for Marshon Lattimore. And then they also took on a $14 million cap hit in dead money in 2024, and then a $31 million dead money cap hit in 2025. At the time, my take on this was it was a good deal for the Saints. Marshon Lattimore is a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy. His contract was huge. He's a very talented player on a team that wasn't competing for anything. It made sense to move on for him, get off that contract, get younger, get some assets, and he was the only guy really worth anything in terms of a trade. Now, I understand a lot of people were skeptical and didn't like that the Saints only got a 3rd, a 4th, and a 6th. They felt like they could have got a 2nd. But when you look at the cornerback market and what teams have gotten for cornerbacks who had stayed healthy and have been playing better and played all 15, 16 games and didn't have this kind of contract, it was about the same ballpark. So my initial thoughts when this first happened was a 3rd, a 4th, and a 6th is great for a team that needs as many draft picks as possible. Fast forward to now, late January, and I'm feeling a lot better about this. The Saints have another 3rd, 4th, and 6th-round pick. Although they're a little bit later in the rounds because the Commanders did very well this season. But I'm not going to complain. Marshon Lattimore did not look very good for the Commanders. He got cooked by A.J. Brown their first meeting. He got cooked by Mike Evans. He got cooked by A.J. Brown again in the playoffs. He hasn't looked good for the Commanders. Then he had the injuries with the Commanders. He missed some more games. It wasn't looking good, and it isn't looking good for Marshon Lattimore in the Commanders. If I was a Commanders fan, I would be very upset about this trade right now. So for the Saints, things are going their way a little bit. We can't say they've won the trade yet because we don't know who they're going to draft with these 3 picks. So we can't declare the Saints a winner, of course. But right now, I think things are trending in the right direction for the Saints. So around the trade deadline, Marshon Lattimore got traded. And then there's some other stuff about maybe Granderson being available for trade. This was one right here. After the announcement of Zadarius Smith trade with the Browns, Lions general manager Brad Holmes has been in contact with the Saints front office about Granderson. And I can confirm actually that teams were calling about Granderson in a trade. But the Saints obviously didn't move on from him. And I think it was a smart move. I don't think they would have been able to anyway. He just signed his contract extension in the middle of the 2023 season. I don't know how hard or easy it would have been to get off his contract, but based off of his restructures, I think it would have been hard and definitely not worth it for like what, a 5th round pick I'd maybe do it for a third or a fourth, but I really doubt that's what the Saints were getting in terms of offers for Carl Granderson. I think he's a good player. I think he's a better number 2, number 3 guy who complements a number 1. The issue with him is that the Saints are allowing him to be the number 1 guy. And of course, there was some other small rumblings and talks about maybe Chase Young being traded because he's an obvious guy who a lot of people would talk about at the trade deadline who could possibly be traded. He's just one of those names. But as of today, there was an article put out by Walter Football. Never heard of him. Haven't seen any of his reporting before. But he's at the Senior Bowl, which is taking place this week. And he put out an article talking about the Saints declining a trade for one of their defensive ends. And no, it's not Chase Young. And no, it's not Carl Granderson. He put out an article, and we'll go over it in just a second. I just want to say, this is a rumor. I'm not saying it is true, and I'm not saying it's false. I'm not questioning his reporting, but I'm also not buying it because I've never heard of the dude, I'm assuming, if it's called Walter Football. The reason I felt like it was capable of going over is because he's at the Senior Bowl, assumingly. I'm assuming he's at the Senior Bowl based off of what he's saying in these articles. And if you're at the Senior Bowl, you're talking to scouts and teams and people who work with the front offices of teams and people around the team and other media members. I'm assuming he's talking to people who know what they're talking about. I'm not saying, though, it is true, and I'm not saying it's false. I'm just sticking with a rumor, and I'm sticking with that. All right, so there's a full article about it. I could put it down in the description for you if you want to check it out. But this was the little section that I wanted to talk about, this little paragraph of the article. And this is under Senior Bowl Buzz Hot Press on Wednesday. So this person is at the Senior Bowl. They're hearing stuff. They're talking to people, and they're figuring information out. That's the only reason I felt like we should be talking about this and maybe going over it. So let's talk about it. Every year in the NFL draft and at the trade deadline, teams turn down trades for veteran players, and some veteran players get shopped without finding a team willing to trade for them. And let's not forget, we had a video a few weeks ago. Cam Jordan requested, or was pretty close to requesting, a trade from the Saints after that game versus the Carolina Panthers. He said he was on the verge of asking for one. Then his agent talked to him, said it was unrealistic given the contract and what teams would be willing to give up for him. So keeping that in mind, that just popped in my head. One team that surprisingly turned down some offers at the trade deadline was the New Orleans Saints. I know they turned down some trade offers for Carl Granderson, maybe Chase Young. That I'm okay with. The Saints had a quick start to the season before a long losing streak realistically knocked them out of the playoff picture by mid-season. Sources from teams said the New Orleans Saints turned down offers for veteran defensive ends like Carl Granderson, like we know, and Payton Turner. And as I'm reading this, he misspelled Payton Turner's first name. Carl Granderson is a good starter signed for the long term at a reasonable rate, so turning down offers for him was understanding. Given his contract, yeah, it made sense to turn down offers for Carl Granderson given the cap hit and stuff like that. However, Turner has been a rotational backup that has been a disappointment as a former first-round pick. It was surprising to some teams that the Saints turned down mid-round pick offers for Payton Turner. New Orleans is at the beginning of a big rebuild project, so many are surprised they turned down draft picks that could have helped them rebuild. Very interesting thing here. Again, not saying it's true or false, and this person misspelling Payton Turner's first name is a little underwhelming and not a vote of confidence. Let's just say hypothetically this is true. Saints turning down draft picks for Payton Turner is actually insane. I don't know how true this is. I don't even know how realistic. I don't know what teams would call for Payton Turner. He's a free agent in the offseason. I don't know who would do this, but I don't know. He was a riser during the draft. Maybe a team likes him. Maybe a team like the Chiefs, who doesn't need all their draft picks, would have sent a fifth for him. That kind of thing. And for the Saints, if this is true, to turn down draft picks for a guy like Payton Turner, who really didn't do anything all season or really ever, is actually insane. In Payton Turner's 4 seasons with the Saints, he has accounted for 5 sacks. 2 sacks this season, 0 last year after not really playing, 2 sacks his second season, and 1 sack his rookie year. What a rough first round pick for the Saints. This is when the Saints picked him at pick 21. I mean, they could have got Gregory Rousseau. Just looking around, I mean, getting Elijah Moore in 2021 would have been helpful. Landon Dickerson would have been huge. He's a pretty good offensive lineman. Let's see, who else could they have maybe picked? This is just not a good draft in general, but obviously Payton Turner at pick 28 was insane. It was crazy at the time, and it looks even worse now with 2020 vision. He's a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's a guy who hasn't been able to put up production. And this past year, he did stay healthy, and he didn't put up numbers or production either. And if that article is true, then that's a shame for Mickey Loomis, and yet another thing that he did wrong. But I'm not counting on that article being true. I wanted to go over it though, because I wanted to get a video out, and I don't know, interesting video, and that's gonna do it. Short video, I know. Hope you enjoyed it though. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, support the channel. Hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.